I'm just going to, I think every book I write, the germ of the book is in the previous book. And I think the germ of this book was in a previous book I wrote called The Psychopath Test. When I was researching the psychopath test, I met a woman called Charlotte Scott, and she was a guest booker for Jerry Springer. And she told me that she had a secret trick that she'd utilize when deciding which guests to book. And her secret trick was that she would ask them over the telephone what medication they were on. And I'm going to quote what she said. She said, they'd give me a list, and I'd assess if they were too mad to come onto the show or just mad enough. So I said, what constitutes too mad? She said, well, schizophrenia is a no-no. So are psychotic episodes. If they're on lithium for psychosis, we probably wouldn't have them on because you don't want to lose the audience. You don't want obvious exploitation. You want smoke and mirrors exploitation. Plus, we wouldn't want them to come on the show and then go off and then kill themselves. She said, although if the story was awesome, and by awesome I mean a far-reaching mega family argument that's going to make a really charged show, they would have to be pretty mad to be stopped. So I said, so what constitutes just mad enough? And she said, Prozac. They're upset. I say, why are you upset? I'm upset because my husband's cheating on me, so I went to the doctor and he gave me Prozac. Perfect. I know she's not that depressed, but she's depressed enough to go to a doctor, and so she's probably angry and upset. And that was Charlotte's secret trick, her way of sourcing people with the right sort of madness to be entertaining for daytime TV audiences. She was reducing people to a slither of themselves, defining the boundaries of normality by mocking the people on the outside. Anyway, after the psychopath test came out, I'd go around the world giving talks about how I thought that empathy and curiosity and compassion were more valuable than instant, hard, mocking judgment. And everybody would agree with me. And then it felt like we'd all go home and do exactly that on social media. And that's why I wrote So You've Been Publicly Shamed. It's so interesting, I think, to map the decline of social media from a place of curiosity to a place of hard ideology. When Twitter began, we suddenly had access to a whole new bunch of people. It gave us a window into other people's lives, and we used it to be inquisitive. Twitter was a place to be unself-conscious back then. By back then, I'm talking about like 2012. There was a saying back then, Facebook is where you lie to your friends. Twitter is where you tell the truth to strangers. And we realized that we had power. If somebody transgressed, if a famous newspaper columnist wrote a homophobic or a racist column, for instance, we could do something about it. We could hit them with a weapon that we understood, but they didn't, a social media shaming. It felt like the democratization of justice. But I think the problem is that we fell in love with our new power too much. Fury at the terribleness of other people started consuming us a lot. In fact, it began to feel weird and empty when there wasn't somebody that we could shame. A day without a shaming felt like a day treading water and picking fingernails. And so the parameters of what we considered shameworthy grew wider and wider. And it wasn't just transgressions we were keenly watchful for anymore. It was misspeakings. Instead of getting people who maybe deserved it, powerful public figures and companies that had committed actual transgressions, we started getting private individuals who had, say, made a liberal joke that came out badly. And it became frightening. Instead of a place to unself-consciously share our shameful secrets, it was like the hunt was on for shameful secrets. We'd tear into people en masse, furiously, like a machine frantically ejecting some destabilizing fragment. And I think it's no surprise that engineers designed Twitter. What do engineers love nothing more than machines that run smoothly? And then if some destabilizing fragment gets in, what does the machine do? It gets rid of them. I'm about to tell the story of a destabilizing fragment who interfered with the smooth running of the machine. Because that's where we are now. We ruin people on almost no evidence. Some bad wording in a tweet becomes a clue to that person's secret inner evil. Anyway, into this atmosphere stumbled a woman I'm going to tell you about now. She's called Justine Sacco. And Justine Sacco had 170 Twitter followers. She was a PR woman in New York, and she used to tweet little acerbic jokes to them. Never got any replies because she had like 100 Twitter followers. She was a comedian telling pretty bad jokes in an empty room. Anyway, one day she flew from New York to London on her way to Cape Town, and while she was at Heathrow on a short stopover, she thought up a acerbic joke, and this is what she tweeted. And so she chuckled to herself and pressed send, and got no replies, and felt that sad feeling that we all feel when the internet doesn't congratulate us for being funny. And then she got on the plane, fell asleep. It was an 11-hour flight. When she woke up at Cape Town, she turned on her phone, and straight away there was a text from somebody that she hadn't spoken to since high school. And the text said, "I am so sorry to see what's happening to you right now." And then another text from her best friend that said, "You need to phone me right now. You are the worldwide #1 trending topic on Twitter." So what had happened while she slept was that one of her 170 Twitter followers sent the tweet to a Gawker journalist called Sam Biddle, and he retweeted it to his 15,000 followers. There you go. Later, I asked Sam Biddle how it had felt to have started the onslaught against Justine Sacco, and he said it felt delicious. And then he said, "Oh, but I'm sure she's fine." But she wasn't fine, because while she was asleep and oblivious, Twitter took control of her life and dismantled it. So first came the philanthropists. Oops. Join me in supporting CARE's work in Africa. I'm beyond horrified. You know, later on I met Justine Sacco a couple of weeks later in a bar. She was just crushed, and I asked her to explain the joke to me. And she said, living in America puts us in a living in America is like being in a bit of a bubble when it comes to what's going on in the developing world. I was making fun of that bubble. So her joke was intended to be a reflexive liberal critique of her own privilege, like South Park or Randy Newman or so on. It was a liberal joke mocking privilege. But she never got a chance to explain that to anybody, because everything that I'm about to show you happened while she was asleep and oblivious on a plane. So first came the philanthropists, then kind of slightly annoying reality TV stars got involved. Then back in the, speaking personally, back in the glorious days when he only got 225 retweets, then it started to get darker. Was anybody on Twitter that night? You were, right? You were. So those of us who were on Twitter that night, excuse my language for a moment, I mean, I was on Twitter that night, and that tweet overwhelmed my Twitter feed like my timeline, like everybody else. And I reacted the same way that everybody else acted, which was, great, somebody's fucked. And I kind of put the pillow behind my head and waited. And then I thought to myself, you know, I'm not entirely sure that joke was intended to be racist. I'm a fan of Randy Newman, so I understand that type of humor. I thought maybe this is just a bad version of a kind of humor that's quite honorable. Hashtag getting fired. Thousands of people decided it was their duty to get her fired. And then corporations got involved, hoping to sell their products on the back of Justine Sacco's annihilation. You know, a lot of companies were making good money that night. I got an internet economist to work out how much money Google made that night, because her name was usually Googled 40 times a month, but that night her name was Googled 1,220,000 times, which means that Google made somewhere between $120,000 and $468,000 in advertising, whereas those of us who did the actual shaming, we got nothing. We were like unpaid shaming interns for Google. And then came the trolls. Somebody else wrote that night, somebody HIV positive should rape this bitch and then we'll find out if her skin colour protects her from AIDS. And guess how many people went after that person? Nobody. That person got a free pass. Everybody was so excited about tearing apart Justine Sacco, and our shaming brains are so primitive that we couldn't handle also tearing apart somebody who was inappropriately tearing apart Justine Sacco. It really felt on Twitter that night that we were toddlers crawling towards guns. And then her company got involved. And that's when the anger really turned to excitement, because what everybody realized we had was a delightful narrative arc. We knew something that she didn't. We knew that she was on trial and we were going to convict her. And she didn't even know she was on trial. And people found that hilarious. The most painful phone turning on moment ever. You know, when I wrote this book, I think we were a good couple, Andrea and I, for this evening, because I really wanted people to feel the agony that we were inflicting on other people online. You know, it's profoundly damaging to your mental health to be at the end of a shaming, as more and more people are realising and more people are committing suicide. Before she even knows she's being fired. Somebody worked out exactly what flight she was on, and so they linked to a flight tracker website. And then a hashtag started trending worldwide. Hashtag, has Justine Sacco landed yet? It's kind of wild to see someone self-destruct. Hipsters. Justine Sacco united Justine united a lot of disparate groups that night, from misogynistic trolls through to delightful philanthropists, through to Donald Trump, through to hipsters. The best thing to happen to my Friday night. And guess what? And if you want to know what it looks like to have just found out that you've lost your job, of course, because social media demanded it, but you've lost your reputation, your life will never be the same again. A year later, when you finally get yourself another job, Twitter will find out and try and get you fired all over again. This is what it looks like. So maybe there's two types of people in the world. Those people who prefer humans to ideology, and those people who prefer ideology to humans. I prefer humans to ideology, but right now the ideologues are winning. And on Twitter, they've created a stage for constant artificial high drama, where everybody's either a magnificent villain, a magnificent hero, or a sickening villain. And of course, you know, there are appropriate shamings where people really are monsters and are brought down. I have no problem with that. When you look at who's trending on a given day, it's usually because they've been deemed the most awesome hero or the worst monster. In a way, I think those are two sides of the same coin, because most actual humans lie somewhere in the grey area between hero and monster. That grey area is where all the most interesting stuff happens, the most interesting nuances, but the grey area is no longer fashionable. As Margaret Atwood wrote last week, or I think 2 weeks ago, in times of extremes, extremists win. Their ideology becomes a religion, and anyone who doesn't puppet their views is seen as an apostate, a heretic, or a traitor, and moderates in the middle are annihilated. The aim of ideology is to eliminate ambiguity. The great thing about social media was how it gave a voice to voiceless people, but we're now creating a surveillance society where the smartest way to survive is to go back to being voiceless. Let's not do that. Thank you.